Something is shifting. What we were told was permanent is being questioned in real time. This is not simply chaos, it's an inflection point, or perhaps more precisely, a rupture. A rupture not chosen, but triggered. The point, however, is not the trigger. The point is our response. A moment when the future can bend toward what we choose to rethink and rebuild. But we cannot reimagine society without first reimagining ourselves. Remember this: every system reflects the beliefs of the society that created it. Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where Reimagine We begins with Reimagine Me. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, a space for reflective conversations, personal empowerment, community engagement, and cooperation. In our reflective conversations, we think together in real time, explore meaning and experience and ideas with curiosity, without attempts to persuade or perform. So here we don't just talk about the world, we examine the ways in which we are being formed by the world and how together we can reimagine it. So I am your host, Anita Russell, and this is Reimagine We. And here's a quick hello from our co-host, Gail Hunter.
Hi, I'm Gail Hunter, and welcome to our program tonight.
So I'm really excited about the topic for today. It's actually a project that's centered around what we're calling Martyrs Day. And it's this whole idea of looking at the 4th of July celebration through a deeply historical lens. And so for today's episode, we're going to be talking about the myth of independence. And so in this conversation, we're going to explore America's Independence Day. July 4th is obviously one of those sacred days in America's worldview narrative, and fireworks light up the sky, and flags and sparklers and speeches and all kinds of stuff that echo the language of liberty. But what are we really celebrating historically? So we're going to dig into that question just to kind of look at the 4th of July through a very different type of lens. So in 1776, I think we all know the story. In 1776, a group of men declared, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." So we've all heard this before, being in elementary school and growing up and learning different things. So we kind of fundamentally know that, right? And it's actually one of the most powerful political statements that have ever been written. Yet at the same time, it's one that is very incomplete. So we're going to talk about what does that incomplete thing actually look like. Because at the very moment that these words were being proclaimed, millions were still enslaved. Indigenous land was still being taken. Women still had no political voice, and freedom was declared, but it wasn't distributed. So we're going to dig into the topic today, and it's centered around this event that's coming up. It's called Martyrs Day, July 5th. Right. And so the question is, what are we really celebrating historically when we think about the 4th of July? So it's not really looking at the words being wrong. It's more looking at the reality that doesn't actually match with the words, right? So we have mastered the art of patriotic storytelling. That's that version of history that highlights the courageous and the home of the brave, but it softens the cruelty and the harm. And so there's a version of history that remembers triumph while minimizing trauma. And so we want to kind of take a look at it, as I mentioned, through a very different lens. And this is what makes the celebration beautiful on the one hand, but also dangerous. So beautiful because the ideals are real, but yet it's dangerous when the myths replace the historical truth. in the narrative. When a nation confuses its aspirations with its actions, it stops asking necessary questions such as who was included in this freedom? Who was excluded? Who paid the price for what we now celebrate? So, this is not about rejecting America. It's about refusing to romanticize its existence by telling the truth. So on July 5th, 2026 represents America's first Martyrs' Day to remember slain activists and protesters in the era of U.S. history, those whose untimely deaths led to positive changes in this nation, and those who made extraordinary sacrifices for equal justice throughout their lifetime. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the founder, and then I want to kind of bring Gail in so she could talk about her personal response to, we've been talking back and forth quite a bit about this Martyrs' Day concept. So the Martyrs' Day founder is a woman by the name of Gloria J. Brown Marshall. She's the professor of constitutional law at John Jay College, an award-winning writer, a playwright, and a legal commentator. She has litigated cases for the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, the Southern Poverty Law Center, and Community Legal Services. And her previous works include She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law and Power, and the Voting Rights War. Dr. Brown Marshall introduces Martyrs' Day, a national remembrance for protesters who were killed in the fight for justice and equality, observed on July the 5th. It's also inspired by Frederick Douglass's speech in 1852, and we're going to talk about that when we get a little bit deeper into the conversation. And that speech actually honors activists who turns words into rights, sparking progress and fairness. And this whole idea of making democracy come to life for everybody. So, Gail, we've been talking back and forth. I just would like you to kind of share what is your personal response to some of the things that I just talked about, some of the things we've been talking about in this whole concept of July 5th as a Martyrs' Day.
Well, I think it's important, and I'm glad that it's occurring, because in our age today, in this time period, there has been certainly enough that has been attempted at least to erase history, let's say. And I think that what we really need is to be honest with ourselves and each other and own what is ours. It's like even any relationship, which is those are really vital criteria to make a healthy relationship. And so if you can't be honest and you can't own what's yours to own, then usually it gets caught up into a lot of negative patterns of behavior that are not constructive or destructive in any relationship. So I think it's crucial that we are also honoring all those people that were martyrs, and were not that they wanted to be martyrs, but because of their belief and their willingness and their courage, and they were willing to stand up and say, this isn't okay. This is not honest. This is not accurate. As much as the belief is what we all would strive for, the reality was never that, right? Whether you're looking at that, the group of people that was actually applied to would have been white men,
Yes.
and not any other group of human beings that lived here then or now. So I think I'm grateful that Gloria Brown Marshall has done this and then started this going, and I think it's important for everybody to recognize it and to really begin to be willing to be curious and to look into what actually the truth is.
Absolutely. So, because I'm a member of the committee, the founding committee for putting this program together, I've had the opportunity to have so many conversations about the whole concept. What are we doing this for? We've gone back and forth defining what a martyr is. And so our definition of a martyr includes those people, obviously, who were killed in action, so to speak. But in our definition of martyr also includes those people who lost their lives as a result of being in an oppressive system in terms of living in a racialized world and all of that. So, for example, we have kids on there. The four little girls from the Birmingham bombing, as an example. We also have Emmett Till, because these are people who lost their lives, not necessarily that they were protesting or resisting. They were just kind of living their lives, but they got caught up in the system that we're all kind of stuck in right now, and they lost their lives as a result of that. So, Gail, I'm going to let you continue the conversation as we talk about Frederick Douglass's speech. It was delivered on July the 5th, 1852, and the main reflective question is, what to the slave is the 4th of July?
Right. So Frederick Douglass delivered one of the most powerful speeches in American history. And he was invited to speak at the 4th of July celebration in Rochester, New York. And Douglass chose instead to speak on July 5th, deliberately distancing himself from a holiday that celebrated freedom while millions of African Americans remained enslaved. This is a speech. What to the slave is the 4th of July? I answer, a day that reveals to him more than all other days in the year the gross injustice and cruelty to which he is the constant victim. To him, your celebration is a sham, your boasted liberty and unholy license, your national greatness, swelling vanity, your sounds of rejoicing are empty and heartless. Your denunciations of tyrants, brass-fronted impudence, your shouts of liberty and equality, hollow mockery, your prayers and hymns, your sermons and thanksgivings, with all your religious parade and solemnity, are to him more bombast, fraud, deception, impiety, and hypocrisy. A thin veil to cover up crimes which would disgrace a nation of savages. There is not a nation on this earth guilty, guilty of practices more shocking and bloody than are the people of these United States at this very hour. So, how does this make me feel? Horrible. But what he spoke, what he said was so accurate and so true that that we all need to realize that. And that's a huge part of what the problem is, right? Denial is such an incredible defense mechanism, and it can feel like it is extremely useful, but we've found over and over again that denial is not. It only hides the truth, and it's only through the truth that we are able to actually move forward and grow. And what he attempted to do was to express that truth and to help everybody be able to see what really this was about and what was really going on at that time, and what still is going on in some ways, in many ways, that needs to change. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. And Gail, I
think about that. That was 1852.
yes. I was just going to say, I really appreciate you being raw and real, because this stuff is, when we sit in our seats today in 2006, 2026,
Sure.
but then you remember all of this stuff. Every time I see those four little girls, or I see something about Emmett Till, or some of the other people that are listed, one of the people that I'm going to talk about later is Celia.
Right.
And you just see these individuals who were fighting, some of them fighting.
And some of them were just innocent victims.
And some of them victims. Absolutely. Absolutely. So I just wanted to say that I really appreciate you just being so raw and so honest. That was just an incredible moment. And for the most part, when I think about my own personal response to all of this, I feel those emotions also. I have been connected to this type of work most of my life. I've shared my story multiple times. My mom was an activist, so I was raised in an activist home. I had that experience of being in one school environment and then getting moved over completely to
Right.
another school
Right.
environment. And in the process, part of my identity, not so much the way I identify myself, but in the way that other people were looking at me, that I think I said this when we were together the last time, that I went from being Dawn Russell to being one of the Black kids.
Right.
And in that process, I felt like somebody else was trying to steal who I was away from me, right? And when I think about Frederick Douglass's speech, um, and that question, so everybody's celebrating, and I really applaud the fact that he decided not to come on the 4th of July, that he decided to defer it and come on the next day, because that enabled him to really ask the question, after all the celebratory events and all the fireworks, after all of that was done, what to the slave is the 4th of July? We call it Independence Day, but independence for whom?
That's right. And it was not independence for everyone. And
Exactly.
yeah, and part of my my deep sadness and in some ways it's a feeling of horror that this is we are still dealing with this, and but just the unawareness and that so many people have of what's still going on and what had gone on. I mean, I just it's almost beyond my mind's capacity to really grasp that. Yeah, and my wish for all is that we all have to wake up and we all have to start owning what is ours to own. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like there's so much energy now around when I look at different people that I'm connected to, um, different Black communities, and the information that's being put out there. I feel like now there's a boldness that is really, really evident now. And I think a lot of it I attribute to the fact that we have the internet. We have all of these tools that we can use to be able to get our messages out there and to be able to communicate and let people know this is how we feel.
Right.
And there are moments and instances where you have these individuals that want to monolithically define who Black people are, as if we're just all one thing. And that literally just blows my mind when I think about it sometimes. The diversity that is there, if you just look at the Black community alone, the diversity that is there. And so a lot of times in doing this work, I also tie it back to my faith. And everything, I have read the Bible cover to cover at least once to twice in my life, right? Literally just read the entire Bible. And there isn't one shred of evidence in the Bible that where we are right now and how we interact with one another across different cultures, across nationalities, across all of it, none of it is reflective of what God's intentions were for humanity. So I often feel like we took something that was such an incredible gift, the gift of life, and we have tainted it on so many levels.
So many.
And the whole entire view is so completely different from what God wanted for us. And so when I hear these words that Frederick Douglass is speaking, and speaking about fraud and deception and impiety and hypocrisy, that's literally where we are. The sum total of all of the history of the United States of America up until this very day, those words are the sum total of who we have allowed ourselves to be over the course of time.
That's right.
And it's sad.
Well, it's extremely sad.
Yes,
Grow when you're not basing your belief systems in truth and absolute truth. And So no, we are not able to grow beyond where we are until we can do that.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. And you
and that's
remember,
what God represents, is that absolute truth. That
right?
not one of us is more or less or better or whatever, right?
Absolutely. And there
Yeah,
isn't one dominant race. There isn't one
no, that's right.
dominant group of people. There isn't one
Not a
dominant.
hierarchy, yes.
Exactly. There's none of that.
No, that's right.
There's none of that. And
No.
so I personally feel really, really blessed to be around individuals who recognize the truth that we're speaking here and can recognize the truth of the words that Frederick Douglass
Yeah.
had spoken way back in 1852, but those words are still just as powerful today because we may be living in contemporary times and we have all these tools at our fingertips and all of these things that we can do. But the question is, are we better at being human beings now
Right.
than we were 100, 200, 500 years ago, or what have you? Are we better at being human beings? And I would say the answer is no, we are.
No. Read a newspaper, listen to anything on the news right now, and you could never say yes. Yeah, that's right.
Exactly, exactly. So it's been really interesting as we've been putting together this Martyrs Day, because it started off as just one idea that came from this woman, and she, Gloria Brown Marshall, as I mentioned her name earlier, and she just started reaching out and talking about this particular topic and just getting people involved. And on the website, so our audience can actually go and visit the website. It's martyrsday.us. And there's so many people from different cities, different nationalities. We have Indigenous people that are parts of different programs and all of that. So it's actually, we're hosting the big sort of central meeting is in New York, but then we have all of these satellite meetings all over the place, all over the country, including in Pittsburgh. Because as a member of the executive board for the Edna B. McKenzie branch of ASALA, I've been a part of putting together what our program is going to look like. So when we get to the end of all this, that'll be one of the things that I'll kind of call out to our audience, that registration is open for that event and everything. But it's just been an incredible process, just coming together and everybody just coming together on this one topic, and also recognizing the fact that this is the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence and all of that. So it's significant in that respect as well that we've decided to have the conversation. And I don't remember, Gail, I'm not sure if you remember years ago when you did that workshop with me and I opened up the workshop talking about the coin,
Yes,
how
yes.
if you think about
Both
America
sides
as
of
a
the right.
coin, yes.
Mhm.
And and when I was putting that together, I actually did some research because I wanted to know, do all coins
Mhm.
have multiple, something different on each side? I think I found in one country they have a coin where it's the same image on both sides. I don't remember the country now, but I just found one. But just looking at something as simple as a coin to be able to say, I mean, we say it all the time, heads or tails,
Right.
right? And so I look at America kind of like that heads or
Mhm.
tails coin. You got one story on one side of the coin, and you have a very different story on the other side of the coin. And some of the things that we have been talking about as we were putting all of this together and really talking about the martyrs themselves. So, for example, we did an exercise where each one of us had to select one person on the list that really resonated with us as individuals. So that was kind of an interesting
Mhm.
thing for us to do. So we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later. Gail and I also selected somebody from the group um, to kind of talk about what individual really resonated with us. So, Gail, we have about 5 more minutes before we go to break. Is there anything else that you would like to share in your response as you were reading, especially as you were reading through the list of all of the martyrs. And I know you picked one. I don't even know which one you picked yet.
Yeah.
And I know that you picked one of them. So if you could talk a little bit about what your experience was when you were just going through the website and looking at the information and the list of martyrs we have.
What really I noticed the most of these are just people that some just happened to be in a place where when something occurred, others were innocently accused. I mean, and many were innocently accused and really viciously murdered or injured or so many different things that happened. But they all, I think from each of their death, it spurred on people to stand up and say enough. And to really fight, to really begin whatever the era was, to begin to take another step and say, this is not going to be okay ever.
Exactly.
And we have to stop it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Truth has to come through. Yeah. That one person got better or worse than the other. And the whole reason for the justification for slavery is based on a lie that a slave trader told over in Portugal or Spain. I mean, it just.
Yeah, there's so many aspects to all of this, but I think one of the central aspects is, given where we are now, it's really time for America to stand on the truth of history.
Exactly.
I just really believe that very, very strongly. And, I think about sort of the people up here, that stuff that's going on above our heads.
Right.
And all of that. And one of the most striking, there's so many striking things, but there was one speech that really, really got to me. And it was Marco Rubio, who delivered the speech at the financial forum. His entire speech was laced with colonialism. Literally speaking that language and speaking those words. And here we are in 2026, and we have someone in the office of the president, the White House and everything, and that's their mindset.
Right.
Is this idea of maintaining colonialism, colonial rule, and all of that. To me, I think about these things every day, and it's just so mind-boggling to me where we are right now.
I know.
On the one hand of that type of conversation, but then on the other hand, all of the resistance that I'm seeing, that's what energizes me, is that the resistance is there. And I think as long as we keep that up, there's the potential for things to actually be different. My sort of moniker, if you will, with Reimagine We is the full tagline, if you will, is Reimagine Me, because we have to be willing to take a good, hard look at ourselves on a very deep level. And then reimagining we. So once we've looked at each other on that deep level, and now we're starting to come together in a sense of community, right? And then the power of that is how we can reimagine the world. So it's not just one individual reimagining, it's us coming together and reimagining and creating something that can be a catalyst for things to be different in as we move forward. So we're going to go ahead and take a break now. And then when we come back, we'll continue the conversation, uncovering the myth of independence, Martyrs Day, July 5th, 2026.
Hey everybody, oh my goodness, we have got talk radio for all of it.
Really, thank you for blazing the trail for women in talk radio and just being such an inspiration to me and so many other people. What you're doing is so awesome, and without people like you there to really step out of the box and go for it, I don't know if someone like me would have ever ended up here, but I'm so happy to be here. And I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. You're one of my major inspirations.
Luvology is where your body remembers what your soul never forgot. I work with men and women who are often at the edge of midlife, who are done with surface level living. People who've built the life but still feel numb, who ache for something deeper, more presence, more truth, more touch. We work with what's been silenced: desire, shame, grief, raw pleasure, and the truths your body has been whispering for years. Using ancient practices, modern science, and yummy, delicious sex tools that awaken rather than perform, we reclaim what it means to feel deeply and live turned on from the inside out. This isn't about fixing. This is about remembering. This is conscious hedonism, rooted, real, and alive. If your body's been asking for more, you are in the right place. This is Luvology. Want to go there? Book a compatibility call at gwenemcarsley.com. Let's begin. Hi, I'm Gwenem Carsley, transformational body, sex, and soul coach. This is not a show just about sex. This is a show about being raw, real, and awake inside the skin you're in. This is about the mess and magnificence of being human through the gateways of intimacy, eros, and what we rarely tell. It's a reckoning with the real, where breath meets bone, where truth undresses us and gasps seep through the cracks. We're not here to behave. We're here to feel, to experience, to grow and expand, not at the convenience of others. It's for the parts of you that have been silenced, ache, grieve, pulse, remember, and forget. We strip it all back. The shame, the scripts, the performative sex, and performative self. We speak the unspoken. We get intimate, not just with bodies, but with truth, gritty and soul-bearing. We explore what it means to live inside, knowing we are going to die, not as someone you were told to be, but as who you really are beneath it all. Imperfect, hungry, sacred, messy, in skin, in soul. Join me at Skin and Soul, Fridays at 10 a.m. PST on Transformation Talk Radio.
So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast as we continue our discussion uncovering the myth of independence. And we're talking specifically about the 4th of July, but also the 5th of July. So we've been talking about Martyrs' Day. And one of the questions that we have is, what does it cost to make freedom real? So when you think about the ideal of freedom, what is the price of making that an ideal for everyone who lives in America? Not just a segmented group or a political group or a certain economic level, but what would it cost to make freedom real for everybody? So if July the 4th declares freedom and July 5th tells the truth about freedom, then we must use July 5th to also acknowledge something more difficult, that there is a price to be paid for closing the gap, right? So between that promise of freedom and the reality, who gets to receive it? So there's a gap there in terms of who gets to receive the freedom that was defined in the Declaration of Independence, right? It has also been forced by people who refuse to accept the lie. People such as those individuals who are putting this work together, doing this whole thing and was examining the 5th of July, but also by people who challenge the systems that are built on exclusion, right? So these are the people who are paying the price to close the gap. They're the ones who are taking the action and the people who are risking everything so that others might one day live more freely. So when we think about these types of people, these are who we remember, but many of them are not remembered as well. Some are taught in textbooks. We all know that not all of them are taught in textbooks. Some of them are literally erased, right? And so if you are not an individual who kind of hungers for truth, then you'll miss the possibility of what freedom could really look like for everybody, right? So, but whether we remember or whether we forget, or whether people are honored or whether they're ignored, their lives have a common truth. And that common truth is that is that freedom has never been and never will be free. It's something that has to be fought for. So, Gail, your response to that?
I think that's sad just in itself, right? It's freedom is one thing that needs to be free, right? That we have certain birthrights, and that free will is a gift, right, from God. And we all have that free will, and that means we have the free will to be able to choose. And that usually designates freedom. But we have the ability and the right to choose. And does that mean, but I think the goal has always been to choose, not just wisely, but to choose whatever that is based in absolute truth.
Yeah, and to choose justly.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, to choose justly.
Justly, respectfully, and what is absolutely true. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I have completely enjoyed all of these. As a matter of fact, when we get done with this show, I have to jump on to a meeting for us as we're continuing to complete the planning for everything. So one of the things that I think I mentioned earlier that Gail and I did was that we went through the list. And each one of us selected one individual that really resonated with us. So I'm going to start by sharing the person that I selected is a woman by the name of Celia. And the main reason I selected her is because when you go on the website and you look at all of the martyrs, we have an image for all of them, but we didn't have an image for Celia, right? And so for whatever reason, I was really drawn to know her story because I couldn't see her face, right? And so I wanted to at least know her story. And so I started doing research on her so I could understand what her background was and what was the situation that she found herself in. And if I was to take her story and condense it down into sound bites, one sound bite would be a battle for the ownership of the human body, right? And so the question is, who owns your body? So when you think about the history of slavery, transatlantic slavery and slavery in other parts of the world and all of that, but when you think about that, it's a loss of bodily autonomy is what the experience is when you become enslaved, right? And so freedom is not experienced in documents. Freedom is experienced in the body first. So before a person can vote, before they can own property or speak freely or worship freely, there is one fundamental question. And that fundamental question is, who owns your body? Can you decide what happens to your body? Can you protect it? Can you refuse it? Can you say no? So for millions of enslaved Africans and their descendants, the answer was a resounding no. I do not own my body. And Celia is one example of that because this denial is actually visible in the lives of Black women in particular, right? So I'll tell you a little bit about Celia. Celia was an African-American woman in Callaway County, Missouri. And beginning at the age of 14, so she was actually purchased by a slave owner. His name was Robert Newsom. And Robert Newsom's wife had passed away. And so he didn't really have I believe from what I read, he didn't have any females on his plantation. And so he decided to go out and buy one, right? So he went out and he purchased Celia. And he purchased her when she was a teenager, right? And so beginning at the age of about 14, he started sexually assaulting her repeatedly sexually assaulting her. And in 1855, She was 19 years old, and she ended up killing him while defending herself against another attack, another assault. Her defense attorney went to the bat for her, though, and insisted and argued that she had the right to self-defense. But the issue was not in relation to her in general, in terms of bodily harm or bodily injury. And I believe, if I read correctly, one of the laws on the books in Missouri at that time was that a woman had the right to defend herself, right? Particularly when it comes to like sexual assault. But the argument was rejected in Celia's trial, and it was rejected because she was property. So if you're property, that law refers to women. But because we don't consider you to be a woman, we consider you to be a piece of property. So therefore, that law calling out self-defense, that a woman has the right to defend herself from being sexually assaulted, did not apply to property. The court ruled that enslaved people had no such right. So again, who owns the body? She didn't own her own body. And she was convicted of the murder and executed by hanging in 1855. And I feel like her case really illustrates the complete denial of bodily autonomy and legal protection for enslaved people in America. It just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And to be defined as a piece of property, like you're a table, or you're a chair, or you're a horse, is so incredibly demeaning. And that was what they did to her. You're a piece of property. So no, you're a piece of property. You don't get to defend yourself. So you get to lose your own life as a result of where we are. So when I read that story, it made me just incredibly sad. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Gail so you can share, Gail, what your story was and how it resonated with you.
Okay, so on August 31st, 1955, the mutilated body of 14-year-old Emmett Till was found floating in the Tallahatchie River. 14.
We got two 14-year-olds.
Right. He had been beaten and murdered for allegedly whistling at a white woman, one of countless Black men, women, and children lynched without recourse in the century following the Civil War. He was obviously not the first, many had been. But Till's story woke up the nation up to the violent reality of being Black in America. Raised in Chicago, he was visiting relatives in the Mississippi Delta that summer, and family remembered him as being a fun-loving, gentle boy who loved practical jokes and making others laugh. A detail worth passing on. Not a symbol, not a martyr, just a boy. But in the early mornings of August 28th, 1955, two white men, Roy Bryant and J.W. Milam, abducted Till at gunpoint from his great-uncle's home. They severely beat him, gouged out one of his eyes, and ultimately killed him with a single gunshot to the head, and then threw him in the banks of the Tallahatchie River. What happened next is, in many ways, probably the true turning point of this story. And that part of the transformation that turned this from tragedy actually into testimony. His mother, Mamie Till Mobley, made the courageous and historic decision to hold an open casket funeral in Chicago. The shocking photographs of Till's body published in Jet magazine and other publications and exposed his brutality to the nation and the world. More than 50,000 people attended the funeral service. The National Museum of American History, African American History, and Culture, National Museum of African American History and Culture wrote about it. At a trial, Till's great uncle Mosey Wright courageously testified that the two men had identified themselves to him, and they had clearly seen the one making the first time a Black man had testified to the guilt of a white man in the state of Mississippi. Despite this, the all-white, all-male jury deliberated only 67 minutes before acquitting both men. Jurors later admitted in interviews that although they knew the men were guilty, they did not believe imprisonment or the death penalty were appropriate punishments for white men who had killed a Black man, a 14-year-old adolescent. Emmett Till's murder was a spark in the upsurge of activism and resistance that became known as the Civil Rights Movement. The sight of his brutalized body pushed many who had been content to just stand on the sidelines and push them directly into this fight. And during the fall of 1955, several 100,000 people joined rallies protesting Till's murder in Chicago and other large cities. With a growing coalition of churches, labor unions, and Black organizations helping launch what became the emerging civil rights movement. 100 days after Till's murder, Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat, in part by the Till murder to act against injustice. In the early 1960s, 5 years after his death, lunch counter protesters and freedom riders called themselves the Emmett Till generation.
Yes, every time I hear that story, and I actually visited the African American Museum, the National Museum in Washington, D.C. I haven't been there in a while, but they have an Emmett Till exhibit. And what was incredibly interesting to me is the way they had the exhibit set up is that you go in on this side and then you literally pass. And they have like imagery of him lying in the casket, all of that. So you literally pass that and you exit on the other side. When I went through that, it was so incredibly powerful emotionally because you really had this sense that you like of what it must have been like for them as they were passing his casket and looking and observing what happened. It's just an incredibly moving experience. And the other thing that I found was that everybody was so quiet. It was this sense of reverence this sense of reverence that was there as people were passing. Like you come up, people were talking as they were approaching, but as soon as they got into the entrance, all conversation literally stopped. So I look at that as this, like, you know, how we talk about our ancestors and that generational power that we feel. That's what that was for me. Because all these individuals are passing, some of them were little kids, you know, but there was something reverent about the way they were. So it was just very interesting to me. So, but
it's amazing that his death and the violence of it and his mother's choice to make the casket open really did activate so many people, right?
Yes. Yeah, and I've seen imagery of people at the actual funeral, people responding and all of that. And I think that was a very courageous move on the part of his mother to make it completely known. This is what these people did to my son. And then later on, many, many years later, the story was recanted that Emmett Till didn't actually even do what he was accused of doing. So when you hear all of these stories and all of these scenarios, and there's so many, oh my gosh, there's just so many. So when you start taking that really deep dive into the history of Black people in America, there's just so much horror, tragedy,
So much fun.
terror, and all of that. And that's why it's so disheartening when people try to put the lid on all of that and cover all of that up. No,
Right.
this is the time for truth.
Right. That's right. It is a time for truth.
This is the
It's a time to see how much injustice has always been there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So the real question is, can we celebrate Independence Day and Martyrs Day honestly? Can we hold pride and critique at the same time? Can we honor the ideals without ignoring the contradictions? Can we tell a story that is inspiring while at the same time honoring truth and sacrifice? Because if we cannot do these things, then celebration becomes performance and freedom becomes nothing but theater. So we have an audience here that's kind of listening to all of this, and I have 3 questions that I'd like to pose to the audience. The first question is, what does July 4th represent to you emotionally, and where did that meaning come from? Question number 2, what parts of American history are missing from the way Independence Day is typically celebrated? And the final reflective question is, can a nation celebrate freedom honestly without confronting who was excluded from it or who died to strengthen it? Those are some really powerful questions. And I feel like those are the types of questions that we need to be asking ourselves in this point in time in the history of America. This is the time to speak truth and honesty.
That's right. It is.
And once that honesty and that truth is spoken, we have to think about, now what are we going to do? What are we
Each of us has a part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That is exactly it.
It's like
And one of the challenging parts is every person out there who might be listening to the sound of our voice, no matter what group you're in, whether you're Black, white, Asian, Indigenous, whatever, it really starts with a very thorough self-examination of you.
right.
What do you see? What are your thoughts, beliefs, and ideas that live inside of your head that are a result of the worldview that was formed inside of you? So that critical self-reflection and getting to a place of self-mastery, I feel like that's one of the things that's really going to help us to kind of begin to move into a different space, a different time, to acknowledge the truth of America.
We can't build on what is not true, right? We have to begin to open up and really own what is absolutely true. And then we can move forward, but only then.
Exactly. And like I said, it doesn't really matter what path you've come from.
That's right.
That reimagine me, reimagine we, reimagine the world.
That's right.
Right? But it starts with every individual having a true understanding of who I am. How do I connect? How do I show up in the room? Right? What are my words, actions, and behaviors that I carry with me everywhere I go? So that critical self-examination, I feel like if we have not done that now, then, I mean, this is the time.
It is the time.
This is the time. This is absolutely time. I saw, I'm going to say this real quick, and then I'm just going to kind of start to wind down. But I saw a gentleman, this is a white man, right? I don't remember like the details where he was from or anything like that. But in this video, he was describing his experience at being in a Black church for the very first time. This man was literally weeping because he was talking about the love that was there, the emotion that was there. And he talked about the fact that I've been in a church before. I've never had an experience like that in my life. And I think that's how we sometimes walk around with these blinders on, because the only thing that we can see is what is right in front of us. What are the things that we have experienced? And him going into that Black church and experiencing, having that worship experience, took the blinders off.
Right.
So that's what the challenge is for us as individuals. Take the blinders off.
Yes.
Open up your heart, your ears, to be able to see and understand somebody else's story. So we have about 2 more minutes. Gail, your final thoughts, and then I'm going to close.
It's open up and see someone else's story, and open up and see where your story came from. And what do you actually believe in this time, in this moment, in the present? What is the truth that you believe in? Not just what you've heard, been told, but what do you honestly, really, deep within yourself believe?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So this brings us to the end of another incredible episode of Inflection Point Podcast. So to our audience, I'd like you to go and check out our giveaway resource. We have like a lot of resources there. The first one, though, I want you to really take a look at martyrsday.us. And then that's where you can find all the information on Martyrs Day. There's events that are going on in different areas and different cities across the country. We are super excited to be able to do it. And if you're in the city of Pittsburgh, you can definitely come to the event that we're hosting. And that information is also in the giveaway list. I read these audience reflection questions. You can actually go in and download the audience reflection questions, and if you want to kind of download it and study and ask yourself, or answer those questions. And then I'm also running a complimentary Reimagine We workshop. That information also is there. So thank you for joining and listening to us. This was a very in-depth conversation that we had, and I'm so excited about the workshop. I'm so excited about the Martyrs Day program and all the other things that we have available. So I want the audience to walk away with this, our tagline: reimagine me, reimagine we, and reimagine the world. That's really what our work at Inflection Point Podcast is all about. So I thank you for attending. Thank you for listening. We are here every first and third Wednesday of the month. Inflection Point Podcast at 3 p.m. Pacific time, 6 p.m. Eastern time on the Transformation Network. So until next time, keep listening for those inflection points that help us to reimagine who we are, how we live, and what becomes possible together. Thank you for tuning in to Inflection Point Podcast on the Transformation Network. To discover more about the Reimagine We platform, subscribe on Substack at anitadrussell.substack.com.